didn't leave him, he left his daddy. He thought he had a better plan. There's people today that think they got a better plan than God does. There's people today that think they know a better way to do it than God does. Some people think they know a quicker way, an easier way. But I'm here to tell you tonight, God's the only way. His way is the only way. His way is the only one that is right, that is perfect. Even though it may be hard at times, and you may walk through hard times with Him, He is still there and He's still faithful. It said when He came to Himself, He said, "How many hired servants of my father's have bread enough and to spare? And I perish with hunger." You know, Jesus said, "Those that hunger and thirst for righteousness shall be filled." I don't know of a better thing you can fill yourself with. There's people today walking around this world, they are starving for something, and they can't find it. They've tried everything. This young man had tried everything. He spent everything he had. And look, I believe his daddy had some money. His daddy had a lot of servants, had a lot of farmland and a lot of animals, and he was a pretty wealthy man. And he gave this boy what his portion was. And he left thinking that when I leave here, I'm going to go find me a better place. You know, a lot of people today, they think, well, you know what? This just ain't so good here hanging out with God. I don't get to have the fun I used to have. I don't get to hang around with the people I used to hang around with. Am I talking to anybody tonight? And you know what? Before they know, they've wandered out. They on a road somewhere, and they absolutely lost. He said, "My father has so many servants, and not one of them have ever been hungry. And here I am, about to starve." I think he began to realize he was in the position he was because of the decision that he made. And you know, today, so many times, people want to blame everybody else for their problems. And you know what we need to start doing? Realizing that where we are is probably by some decision that we made. It's time today that we begin to live in truth and reality, to realize that, you know what? We talked this morning, you can't get in prison without doing something, right? This young man found himself in this position because of what he chose to do. He said, "I will arise and go to my father." You know what? There ain't but one way out. You got to go to Him. And you got to go. You can't sit. You can't lay down. Let me ask you a question. What would have happened if that boy said, "You know what? I'm just going to sit right here, and my daddy, one day, he'll come by here and he'll find me"? Would he have ever been found? You know what? His daddy was looking for him, but he wasn't on the road looking for him. His daddy was in the same place he was at when the boy left. But yet he was looking for him to come back. You know, today a lot of times people just want to sit down and think, well, you know what? God will come by and find me again. Do you realize people don't want to go look for God anymore? They don't. When God is in the altar, waiting, that's where God dwells, in the altar, right? That's where we go and meet Him there. And it's like sometimes people want God to come grab them up out of the pew and drag them down here. I don't know what it is, but there's just something about people don't have a desire to get into God's presence. But see, this young man, he realized, you know what? I got to go home. Home ain't going to come find me out here. See, he was raised and knew. He had lived in a position that he knew what he was supposed to do. You know what? People, they wander out on God all the time. And you know what? God's still standing there waiting on them. There are people that used to go here that have wandered out on God in the world. And God's still standing there waiting on them. He's still standing right here saying, I'm looking, I'm waiting. The question is will they come to themselves and realize, you know what, I messed up. Life don't exist out here in the world. The world is full of sorrow and trouble. The only way to have life and have it eternal and have hope is through Him and to be in His presence. And the only way to be in His presence is you got to find Him. And once you get in His presence, you got to stay there. It said, I will arise and go to my Father and will say unto Him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before Thee. That's what people have to do today. They've got to repent. You know, a lot of people, it seems like they kind of want to be sorry, but they never come to the point to repent of it. They never come to the point to say, God, I'm sorry, I messed up. That's that pride word, isn't it? You know, it's something about it. It's amazing how pride is such a strong enemy. You realize it keeps most people out of victory? Do you realize that? Pride is something that plagues people more than sickness, disease. Did y'all realize that? Pride. And the Word said that pride goes before destruction, right? When I read the Word, it says you're supposed to be humble. It said in verse 19, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. Make me as one of thy hired servants. Verse 20 says, and he arose and came to his father. But when he was yet a great way off, his father saw him. And he had compassion. And ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. The son said unto him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in thy sight, and am no more worthy to be called thy son. But the father said to his servants, bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And bring hither the fatted calf, and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead and is alive again. You realize when you get out of God's presence, you become a dead man or a dead woman. There's no life outside of God. Do you remember when they were trying to figure out about the priesthood? And God had told them, said, all right, fine. Y'all go get you some sticks. And y'all bring them in here one by one. And as they brought them in, the one that Aaron had, it began to bud and grow. And it began to bear fruit. It was alive because it was in God's presence. Been off the tree a long time. But it's amazing when you can plug yourself back into God what He can do. He's a source of life, the abundance of it. And apart from Him, there is none. So, you know, in the statement that was made here, this is my son whom was dead and is now alive. He was dead because he stepped out from the presence of being with God. But now he's come back again. It said, and they began to be merry. They began to rejoice. Now here's where the problem comes in. Here's where you find out whether or not you know how to handle it. Whether or not you're ready. Do you realize that?